This video is going to be a film study look at Kyle Hamilton's performance in the Ravens' 28-25 win down in Dallas in Week 3. Hamilton finished with a game-high 12 tackles, 7 or 8 solos, 1 quarterback hit, so obviously very active. He does have 2 really poor coverage snaps, and are both against the same guy, the fullback slash tight end for the Cowboys. I think it's Hunter Lemke, number 40. Has some interesting usage or deployment from a pre-snap standpoint as a tight end, fullback, and then actually is used as the lone running back in some 11 personnel groups. I think his pass receiving skills might be a little underrated, and I do suspect that on at least one play, Kyle Hamilton is A, focused on the quarterback a little bit too much, and B, perhaps underrates Lemke. I'm talking about the missed tackle in the right flats that ends up being a huge 24-yard gain in the second half for Lemke. Let's get right to the film. I'm going to try to get as many defensive-oriented film study videos out as possible. And to be honest with you, most of this one is quite complimentary, even though in my reaction video last night, I said that I thought that Hamilton looked poor in coverage at times, and I'm specifically talking about the 2 reps that we'll focus on against Lemke here later. So this is a cover 3 version that the Ravens play often, whereby they're pushing the nickel defender and in some cases a strong safety out into the flats post-snap. And Hamilton is wider than the bottom of the numbers. I think Kyle Van Noy isn't wide enough. It doesn't give this nice clean delineation in terms of a mirrored look right to left. The Ravens seem to be pushing Van Noy into the boundary. The ball is on the right hash, so that's where the short side of the field is. Hamilton is outside 2, which is Brandon Cooks. It's a 3rd and 5, Cowboys' first possession. When you get the end zone angle, you'll see Van Noy ends up too close to Trenton Simpson. We're utilizing Roquan Smith as part of the blitz. Kyle Hamilton's usage and Marlon Humphrey's are often related in this game. Humphrey played some outside corner, played some nickel corner, even hybrid safety at times. This is that same 3rd and 5. Van Noy's going to drop out, and he's just going to get too close to Trenton Simpson, and there'll be too much space between Van Noy and Hamilton. It's not Hamilton's fault. In my opinion, Van Noy just didn't get enough width in his drop when there's twins over there. You can't leave Hamilton between 1 and 2 into the boundary. It's a shorter throw, especially on a 3rd and 5, which is what the Cowboys do here. They convert for 7 yards. Still first possession. This is a 2nd and 10. Hamilton was really good yesterday at calling certain things out pre-snap. I have no idea what he's communicating here. This is, in fact, an edge blitz by him where he gets a quarterback hit on Dak Prescott. Kind of a dangerous hit from a Cowboys perspective to have someone in on your quarterback's legs like that. But it's a 2nd and 10, like I said, blitz off the edge, forcing Prescott into the boundary, into the right side of their offense. Roquan Smith covers it up, and if it weren't Kyle Hamilton and Chase, you'd say, well, Dak Prescott has the opportunity to scramble and get yards. His burst, his closing speed, I thought Tom Brady covered it well. He just said, look, there's times as a blitzer, he closes ground way faster than you would expect, and I think this is one of those situations. From the hash to the bottom of the numbers here, his closing speed, whatever the distance was between him and Prescott, seemed to be closing or shortening exponentially. This will be the first example of what I would say is a poor coverage snap from Hamilton. He's going to be on Lemke, who's a fullback slash tight end, in this case lined up as a wing. It's a 3rd and 1 in the first quarter. This is the Cowboys' 2nd possession, by the way. Everything else is covered up from a Ravens standpoint defensively. I do think that there's a little bit of an element of lack of trust on this when Harrison starts working down the line of scrimmage, and he could theoretically veer off and try to get into Dak Prescott's face as Prescott boots around to the bottom side of our screen, the left side of the Cowboys offense. Hamilton kind of whiffs here. I wonder if he's thinking that this is a run block, so he's trying to take it on. He kind of ends up tipped over, looking at the ground, totally loses balance and loses contact with Lemke. He's lost at this point, and it ends up being a 17-yard gain. I think Lemke's receiving skills may be underrated. I have no idea about his history. I don't really know much about him at all. I know he beat Kyle Hamilton on this route, and I know that later on he breaks free of a Kyle Hamilton tackle for a 24-yard gain. So we got 2 for 2 between him matched up against Hamilton, and that's disappointing for me. Focus on a little bit of Harrison here running down the line of scrimmage. Also, Stevens is chasing Lamb. The Cowboys, are trying to free him up. It's a 3rd and 1. So a nice job by Stevens of getting across the field. And then Lamb is going to go underneath of Harrison, who I think believes that Lamb must be open, and that's why he veers off here. It is a really nice throw by Dak Prescott. I think Kyle Hamilton played a nice game overall yesterday, particularly against the run. But you cannot watch this snap and see that much separation between him and I don't know how you want to classify Hunter Lemke in terms of quality of tight end opponent, but I think Kyle Hamilton's the better athlete there. End zone angle, same play. You'll see Stevens run across the formation. Post snap, there's no motion because Lamb was on the line of scrimmage. And here's Harrison beginning to turn and try to get underneath of this route by Lamb because Harrison, is not sure that anyone's actually covering it up. So maybe through time over reps, there'll be more trust by the defense. But in this case, number one, Hamilton loses. Number two, Harrison, who's in position to possibly go challenge or at least get in the window of the throw, chooses not to do so because he doesn't know that anyone else is going to have it covered. 3rd and 9 here, still second possession, so we're middle of the first quarter. This is where the Cowboys, I think, end up with having to punt, sack by Kyle Van Noy. As it relates to Hamilton, he is manned up on Lemke down into the boundary, the bottom side of the screen. Innocuous route by Lemke for sure. One thing I want to focus on here is how physical Marlon Humphrey was with CeeDee Lamb. There was pushing and shoving between both of them. I think Marlon Humphrey played a spectacular game yesterday for the most part, being extremely physical with CeeDee Lamb. He's just one of the few guys through 3 games that's at least making contact with receivers in the first 5 to 6 yards. In some cases, it's past that 5-yard barrier. It's a nice move, nice stunt by Van Noy, that is, a win. We actually tried the same stunt 2 other times later in the game. So I'm talking about Van Noy here, going underneath, crossing the midline to the other side of the center. In this case, ends up getting his first sack. Second possession here. This is not necessarily related to Kyle Hamilton on this particular play. I think you do have a missed tackle by Wiggins. Humphrey against this one-man screen. So this is a 2nd and 10, first quarter. Like I said, Cowboys' second possession. We've already scored once. They're going to go down, I think, and get a field goal on this. It's a one-man screen. I actually think the right tackle's release is interesting here. Lemke is the lead blocker. We do this a lot with Ricard. Release him out into the flats, and the running back out into the flats as well. The right tackle's release is interesting here, the way he's taking on Tavius Robinson. We kind of get jumped down here by Ojabo against the left tackle Guyton, and nothing develops at all. I think Prescott's just looking this stuff off, really with no intention of throwing the ball in the middle of the field. This is a 2nd and 10. I think they're trying to create a manageable 3rd down is what we're looking at here. Get 4 or 5 yards. In this case, they get 6 to try to give the offense a chance to convert on a manageable 3rd down. Over here to the backside, you've got a slant by Lamb. Simpson is kind of in the window, but I don't think Dak Prescott was really going to go there. I think this was a design play. Get the ball out into the flats to Ezekiel Elliott. In this case, Roquan makes the tackle after Wiggins missed it. 3rd and 4, this is the ensuing play. Hamilton's going to drop down, and Marlon Humphrey's going to push the flats. It ends up being our cover 3. Where we're rolling Marcus Williams to the middle of the field. It's going to be a completion over the top of Roquan Smith to the tight end. Couple of things to cover here. Cover 3 is mirrored in terms of the way you draw it up, but it's not always mirrored in the way that it works out post-snap, number 1. Number 2, you will see Dak Prescott with a slight shoulder fake, ever so slight here in a moment, used to just hold Roquan, coming up in a moment, used to just hold Roquan and then throw the ball over the top to Ferguson, who is a really talented receiving tight end, if you ask me. Wasn't healthy in week 2 against the Saints, was healthy yesterday against the Ravens. I think he makes a big difference. So let's talk about the mirrored aspect of it. This is the number 2 receiver here. Here's the number 2 receiver to the boundary, to the right side. Hamilton's spinning down. He's going to be outside leverage of the tight end. Marlon Humphrey down here is going to push this number 2 receiver out. He's going to basically force him to expand. We're not playing divider technique at all, so that's interesting to me in that we're expanding this guy. We're trying to basically funnel these 2 receivers in the same vertical lane. In my experience, you're generally trying to get this guy between those 2, basically at the midpoint between these 2 players in a vertical line, divider technique. Not doing divider technique up to the top side either. But it's a different split up there. You've got a tight end and a receiver, number one. Number two, it's to the boundary. So you're not going to expect Hamilton to come down, collision the tight end in space, and still maintain outside leverage. It's just not the same possibility in terms of a technique post-snap that Marlon has versus Kyle Hamilton. In no way, shape, or form am I saying that's Kyle Hamilton's fault. It's a nice job by Dak Prescott with a little shoulder fake, little pump fake to kind of hold Roquan's feet still and then throw it over the top. This is going to be Kyle Hamilton attacking from the backside. No gain for Ezekiel Elliott. I think Malik Harrison also kind of stacks this up. Two tight end side. Really doing a nice job with the tight end, or Lemke, the tight end slash fullback. Talking about right here into the boundary, which is where Malik Harrison belongs. If you ask me, when he is on the field, we're in our run-stopping group here, him and Tavius Robinson. The close down from the backside by Hamilton is noticeable. Also, too, Broderick Washington against the right tackle, able to get into the backfield. The right tackle kind of slings him to the side, but it creates something in Ezekiel Elliott's path that he's got to veer back off of or cut off of. Kyle Hamilton's able to catch up and close down. Ends up being no gain. I thought it was a TFL in live speed. This is the sack by Matabike that should be intentional grounding. I feel like that's obvious. Won't necessarily break that down a ton, but what's, I think, interesting to note here is you've got Roquan on an inside linebacker, two corners, Wiggins and Stevens, nickel defender in Marlon Humphrey, and then two safeties on the field, as well as Kyle Hamilton. This is our dime look. And to me, I'm wondering about, over the course of a 17-game season, how often we do this with Kyle Hamilton. I said this when we went through the preseason film watching Trenton Simpson. Not that Trenton Simpson didn't make plays, not that he doesn't provide versatility as a guy in coverage to the boundary. But to me, if we have everyone healthy, and here we are with Ardarius Washington, Marcus Williams, Wiggins, Stevens, Humphrey, Roquan, I think this is our best group. When we're talking about pass coverage, when we're talking about being multiple, this is a 3rd and 10, by the way. I don't know how this is not considered intentional grounding. It's a ridiculous glitch in the NFL rules if this legitimately is the right call to just penalize them and force them to punt. This should have been a 16-3 lead. I think we're about 9 minutes left in the second quarter. At this point, the Ravens offense and defense totally dominating. So no one from an announcer's perspective really covered it. I thought the ref in the booth, I forget his name, handled it well, or began to handle it well, but then didn't elaborate. To me, this is the type of thing that you talk about on the broadcast for 3 minutes in a row. And I understand that that's not what the NFL wants. But if you're being intellectually honest with yourself, I don't know how you can classify that as anything other than intentional grounding and a safety in the Ravens' favor. 5th possession, the most unbelievable play that Hamilton made yesterday, this tackle on the reverse. Really well designed reverse by the Cowboys, very similar to something that the Lions ran last week, whereby you get a motion across, and that guy can end up being a lead blocker. Wiggins ends up following the ex-receiver here. So perhaps you'd like a little bit more awareness or recognition, quicker recognition by him that this is going to be a block on Roquan. Roquan is not fooled at all, but you're talking about him being blocked there, Marlon being involved, and then Hamilton fits off of it. Basically, Marlon ends up being the force player, forcing the ball to cut inside. Again, I think Marlon Humphrey played well on Sunday against the Cowboys in coverage, against the run, being physical. In my opinion, he's playing better than people are giving him credit for so far through 3 weeks. 1 yard gain on a play to Turpin, who's very talented. He has a touchdown in the 4th quarter. I don't know if Kyle Hamilton took his helmet off, if it was popping off or what, but we'd like to keep it on as much as possible. Pre-snap, Hamilton's pointing over there, so maybe he knows something. I didn't see this play on film, but Hamilton, A, called something out, and B, reacted beautifully to it. Great form tackle on the outside shoulder. Just folded Turpin up. I guess he did grab the helmet and pull down. So maybe we need to talk about that and hopefully not get a penalty, especially with the way the refs are adjudicating the game at this point. I'm going to give Hamilton credit on this one for eye discipline, which is something that I criticized last week, and I will get back to here in a moment. Because the tight end blocks Van Noy initially. It's a seemingly innocuous 2nd and 7 on the 7th possession early in the third quarter by the Cowboys. But the tight end stepped to Van Noy and blocked him for a moment. There are times when that happens, and you, as a DB, a safety, whatever, are kind of released from your pass coverage responsibility, depending on the scheme and depending on what people teach. Sometimes if the tight end steps to you as an edge defender and blocks you, then you are now responsible for him, and the strong safety, nickel, whatever, can now blitz through that C gap, especially in run situations. Here, Kyle Hamilton stays on the tight end from a visual standpoint. He does begin to look in at this point, if you ask me, but stays with his feet, his lower body and his eyes are connected at this point, stays in leverage with the tight end, just a little bit off balance, ends up being incomplete. He doesn't get credit for a pass defense, obviously, but I think it's an example of him with a visual key and keeping his feet in the right spot at the same time. This is now fourth quarter. The Ravens are still in serious control of this game. Hamilton on the tight end. I would say this is really sticks down here to the bottom side. Pure man up to the top side. Look at Marlon's alignment. Basically canted in, looking at CeeDee Lamb on the backside. Not sure why Dak Prescott didn't look to go back here. It's a 4th and 14, and it's a slot fade. We talked about this route in the preview that I did on Sunday, whereby Cooks, as the number 3 receiver, likes to run this slot fade. They scored a touchdown against the Browns on this. Dak Prescott, in my opinion, is checking to it, making sure that everybody knows what they're doing. There's a free rusher, and actually 2, Roquan Smith and Kyle Van Noy. Hamilton is covering Ferguson underneath, so even if they do throw the ball to Ferguson, number 1, you have the defensive tackle, Travis Jones, dropping out. Number 2, Hamilton would also be in chase, able to make the tackle. He doesn't miss those tackles on those chase situations. Great angle by Ardarius Washington. It's an offensive pass interference on Cooks, who ran the route. Great job by Ardarius Washington of IDing the route. There isn't much on the throw, clearly, from Dak Prescott. Maybe if the ball was thrown further out in this direction, they've got an opportunity for a 50-50 ball or a 40-60, but Ardarius Washington generally played really well yesterday, except for the touchdown that he gave up that I'll cover here a little bit later. Another dime situation. We're still in the fourth quarter. I think we are 11th possession. This is a 3rd and 2, so Hamilton is on here with Roquan Smith at basically will linebacker in our dime alignment. Ardarius is now the nickel, and Eddie Jackson is the left side safety. So I think it's interesting what the Ravens are doing with so many different configurations. I think there is a over-reliance on this play in looking at the quarterback, especially on a 3rd and 2. I think Hamilton needs to be connected to the route. That seems obvious to me. I understand if other people want to give the benefit of the doubt because he is such a spectacular player, number 1, and number 2. We do seem to be in a zone configuration here. This looks like our funnel coverage down here, whereby we're just inside leverage on 2 with Ardarius, and then Brandon Stevens outside leverage on 1, pushing everything into the safety. In my opinion, Hamilton, and he still is, too locked onto the quarterback in this moment, number 1. Number 2, really poor effort at a tackle. Why? Because there was so much space between him and Lemke. I understand that you may not have the same negative opinion of the 2 coverage snaps he had on Lemke. I couldn't be more harsh in my evaluation of those plays. He has to play both of them better, in my opinion, especially against someone that he's a bigger, stronger, faster athlete than. We cannot give up that route into the boundary. That's the reason why Kyle Hamilton is there as the dime defender. That's the reason why he's on the field in this situation, to the boundary, basically where Trenton Simpson would be. I would feel remiss if I didn't mention this. And I love our dime look. I want us to play it more. But if Trenton Simpson is the boundary side inside linebacker there, does he miss that tackle? Finally, this is the touchdown to Turpin against Ardarius Washington. A lot of trust by Dak Prescott in throwing this football. Hamilton and Eddie Jackson are communicating up to the top side of the field. Ardarius a little bit late in his turn, but he's not identifying the ball, obviously. Ends up being a 16-yard touchdown pass. This one cuts it to 28-25. The moment, or one of the moments, I should say, when in the fourth quarter, we as Ravens fans are worried about how much are we going to give up here on defense. And it was a lot. I think they threw for 150 in terms of passing yards in the fourth quarter. Kyle Hamilton only gave up that pass to Lemke that I talked about, that I think I covered probably a little too harshly for some people. And then earlier on in the game had given up the 17-yard catch on a 3rd and 1 to the same guy. He bared no responsibility in that previous play. I thought he played a very good game overall. It's difficult for me to let go of the 2 coverage snaps, particularly when you have the athletic edge over the player you are guarding. You have an attempted level of physicality on the 3rd and 1. I think that Kyle Hamilton believes it's going to be a run play, so he's trying to jam Lemke and not let him get in his route. And then the missed tackle where you have over-focus, over-reliance on staring at the quarterback on the 3rd and 2. Otherwise, played a really spectacular game, but would suggest don't take your helmet off after you make a great tackle on a reverse. At the levels of football that I've coached, football or your helmet comes off, you have to sit out the next play. So that was always a point of focus for us, point of emphasis, I should say, in that make sure your helmet stays on, is strapped up such that it doesn't pop off, and you can stay on the game, especially if you're one of our better players like Kyle Hamilton is. I think he played better than I probably presented it in the reaction video. Those 2 coverage snaps stuck out for me because they were so disappointing, allowing basically 41 yards to Lemke on 2 receptions. Appreciate you guys' time, man. If you think that other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study video of Kyle Hamilton, please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach. Later tonight, Monday night, or perhaps Tuesday morning, I will have a video focusing on the Ravens' first 2 possessions exclusively, where they really blitzed the Cowboys defense and took control on the road. Appreciate you guys' time.